It's,
Yeah.
I could have very well put it, it could be 6.
It's like,
Because they all look the same, you know, just like. All right, everyone, take out the rate bin really quick. I'm just gonna give you credit for doing it. If you were gone, I'll still give you another day to do it. But it's a great video. It covers a lot, so just not a lot of points because I talk about everything in class.
Okay, I have one quick one, but I.
Get them off.
I've already been 20 minutes, so I left on my, but I.
You know, I'm not afraid of my, it's the best.
No, like, I can put it in house right now, because I went here and checked it, that's why.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, because I checked, I just checked to make sure one more time.
Oh.
Everyone who is, especially. I got yours. Good, good, beautiful, beautiful. I talked about these in class, so I'm not too worried. All right. That's awesome. Would you, where do we finish in it? Oh, let me tell you something. I almost forgot. Review session. So I've been doing this for years, and so on Monday intervention time, I will answer some questions. But I've done this in the past, and I'll do it again. Not people want to do it. I know you're busy, but so am I. So I'll take part of my own time on Sunday, come in and do a review session. And I'll go over anything you want on the first 6 pages. I mean, anything I'll go over. You ask a question, I'll give you a possibly correct answer. Anything. So gotta be on my schedule, but if you want to come here to school, I'll come in at 5 o'clock AM, it'll be all day. 5 PM, because it's when I can do it. And I will have that door, you know, the outside door right here, you come in right there, you just do it here, and I'll answer any question you have. So 5 o'clock on Sunday. And I can go through a lot. If you were here on intervention time on Monday, you know how much I can go through. And so that will help you a lot. If there's ones you're not sure about, just want some help, or make sure that you got the, I'm gonna guess what I think the most important thing is, you know. I don't know exactly what the questions were, but if people remind me, I'll film it for those of you who can't make it, but if enough people go, I might even do that again if you want. In the past, I've done it. I also get it though, you know, it used to be really easy to have review sessions because when I first started teaching AP US history, anybody want to guess how many AP classes there were? 2. You're exactly right. And there was one section of AP US history and one section of AP government. That was it.
Just for everything or just the history section?
Everything. Yeah, that's what it was. And that was
I mean,
now don't forget, that was also in the last century, but. All right, so where do we finish in our class? In John. So, what was the name of the senator from Wisconsin who started? Yeah, McCarthy, McCarthyism. What party? The Democrats, and what party attacked the Democrats? If you remember. Yeah, there we go. And it blew up when he started attacking Republicans. So, here? Incheon, North Korea. Did I mention it worked better than anyone could have thought?
Yep.
It was MacArthur's biggest victory. And that includes all this time of being a junior officer in World War I, commanding the Southwest Theater of World War II. Nobody thought it would work. Seoul fell right away and North Korea was in pell-mell retreat. But then MacArthur blew it. He had a chance to cut off all the retreating North Korean supplies, but he decided he wanted what he considered total victory. Not just pushing the North Koreans back. He thought now he could unify North and South. And so, violating orders, technically, he invaded North Korea. And now the United States had all kinds of supply problems because they weren't prepared, but they crossed and North Korea just kept retreating all the way up to the Chinese border, which is the Yalu River. So all this area in blue they took, and North Korean forces were pushed all the way back. It happened in about a month. Mao Zedong of the new People's Republic of China, Red China, remember I told you how they called it that, he threatened intervention. Even though China was devastated by war, technologically far behind the United States militarily, they had a lot of men who had been fighting. And he said he can't allow North Korea to fall. He was no friend of North Korea. But he saw this as part of international politics. The other thing was this. As American forces advanced north, you can see it right here. They're totally unequipped for the Korean winters. They thought the weather was going to be relatively mild. And so they didn't worry too much about all the supply issues. They sent troops with light fall coats and not for the miserable winters of Korea. If you look at the map, this is the 39th parallel. So it's further south than Helena. They just assumed the weather would be mild in the winter, like Tokyo, which is the same latitude. By middle of November, it's 20 and 30 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. And the United States forces are totally ill-equipped. But they kept being pushed. MacArthur ignored all the warnings and pushing them north, trying to get total victory. His greatest victory. Even when they started capturing Chinese forces, they ignored them. MacArthur did not let Truman know. MacArthur met with Truman on Wake Island, right here. They hated each other, I should add. First time they ever met. And MacArthur said China would never enter the war, and if they do, we'll rout them. He hid from Truman that American forces were capturing Chinese forces who had crossed the river. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese forces. They didn't have the heavy equipment, but lots of men who had been fighting. And then, it was literally the day after Thanksgiving, where they tried to get some kind of Thanksgiving dinner for the troops. In the miserable winter, China attacked at the end of November 1950 in a massive counterattack. I like this from Time magazine, and they have the body blow and they have the brass knuckles. It was a disaster. It's going to be the worst military defeat, battlefield defeat of the United States Army since the Battle of the Little Bighorn. It was a crushing defeat. Chinese forces infiltrated. This map didn't work out as well as I wanted to, but it does at least get an idea of how rough the mountains were. Infiltrated behind them, cut off 40,000 Marines at the Chosin Reservoir and nearly destroyed them all. It was such a humiliating defeat that U.S. forces retreated all the way south of Seoul. A disaster. U.S. South Korean forces were in pell-mell retreat. Now, the Chinese had their own supply issues then, but MacArthur totally humiliated and embarrassed. So what does MacArthur do? We need to escalate. And how do we escalate? Atomic war. He talked about dropping atomic bombs on Beijing. He talked about dropping he called it a curtain of nuclear waste on the Yalu River to isolate them from China. These are Marines at the Chosin Reservoir, Chinese on the attack. Oh, the Chinese had better winter gear. It's awful. He's doing this publicly, talking about nuclear war, and implying that President Truman was losing the Cold War. Truman was furious. And he went from, okay, I'm worried about the advance, but we're doing great, I'm going to stick with it, to all of a sudden, we got to get rid of MacArthur. But MacArthur was such a hero, he was afraid to, despite the disaster that MacArthur had led to. And I can't emphasize this enough. MacArthur screwed up completely. And finally, in 1951, surprising everybody, Truman did. He fired MacArthur. And he's going to get a ticker tape parade, come home as a hero. Here's Truman should quit after firing MacArthur. Maybe Truman's a communist. And Truman will become a hero of the right wing, anti-communist group, mostly Republicans, but a lot of Democrats too, who thought that Truman was losing the Cold War. MacArthur started being talked about becoming president of the United States. And so this is the only cartoon I'll explain. It's trying to imply that MacArthur is the great man. People just ignore how badly he screwed up. And here's Truman as a little kid. I'm running this war like he's crying from the office. And people really thought MacArthur would become the next president. The whole thing about threatening World War III, though, is a little bit too much for people. A small cadre liked MacArthur, but not everybody. Back to Korea, with the Chinese now extended. UN forces, US, but also, like, for example, Turkey sent troops, Almost all the Western Allies sent troops if they could. France was having their own little war in a place called Vietnam. But Canada sent troops, Luxembourg sent like 100 men. So they sent forces, and they pushed the Chinese back north of Seoul to this line right here. And for 2 years, it was a bloody, horrible state. Trench warfare like World War I. The biggest fighting would be just taking the high ground. And it was a nightmare. So here are American soldiers at a place really tough fighting the US called Pork Chop Ridge. Here, these are Turks with American equipment fighting a Chinese soldier with a Soviet submachine. And so Korea devolved into a nightmare. Hundreds of thousands of Americans rotate through. Over 1 million South Korean civilians died, and over 400,000 South Korean troops. 700,000 North Korean troops would die. 600,000 Chinese soldiers would die. 40,000 Americans. This was a bloodbath. And you could argue that would lead to people writing, you know what this means? I did not talk about short answer questions with you, have I? I'm going to now. Short answer questions, called SAQs. So we've done many short IDs, so I actually think you're going to do very well on these. But this is part of the AP exam, and this is how they do it. A short answer question. A short answer question is a 3-part short essay question. 3 parts. A, B, and wait for it. A, 3-sentence short ID. B, 3-sentence short ID. C, 3-sentence short ID. So you will have 3 of these on the AP exam. And they're done in a way, okay, I have no idea what the questions will be. I have no idea what the topic. But I really like these because for the most part, you get to pick what you short ID. So here's an example of how they do them. Let me just give you an example. Briefly explain one cause of the Cold War. So you pick a cause of the Cold War. So it could be anything from Yalta, Potsdam, the atomic bomb, Turkey and Greece, Turkey and Greece. The biggies, I would be thinking the Truman Doctrine. You pick it and you say, okay, I'm going to do a short ID on the Truman Doctrine. And then you do a quick summary, give an example of how that's going to happen, like the domino effect, and then give its analysis or importance, what came about the Cold War with it. 3 sentences. They're good questions. And then for B, you do a 3-sentence. So you get a couple choices on this. On the AP exam. And there'll be some stuff from basically from the events that led up to the American Revolutionary War up to about 1990. But most of them will be in between. These are good questions. And so we've done a lot of short IDs. So that's one example of one. Let me give you another example of one. We'll give you a stimulus, a quote. Usually they're shorter than that, but that's a fairly long one. So it's a quote by Joseph McCarthy. It's talking about the 57 Cape communists. Remember, we watched that yesterday, how we just making up numbers. And then you do A, B, and C, where you pick your own short ID to answer each of the questions. Political tactics, so accusing Democrats. And McCarthy's out to blue collar Americans. He's attacking elites. Briefly explain the context for the rise of power. Republicans wanted to attack Democrats. And you pick what you short ID. So the stimulus will give those in to kind of trigger a memory. I'm confident you guys have I don't know what the questions will be. I'm confident there'll be ones that you would answer well. So these are good questions. I like these. It's a small percentage of the test, but it's a good one. It's a good one to do well. It's so good to do well that we should probably do one on our own. So on page 599 of your review book. Everyone got this? 599 of the review book. You're going to have to do one on your own for homework. Let's say 599, I'm at 598. 598.
I like A, B, and C, or is it kind of like themselves?
I'll take that. This one, for me, do A, B, and C.
Okay.
But that's a good question, but I forgot to tell you this. On the actual exam, make it like one really big paragraph, then just put a little A, B, and C where you start. Don't ask me why, but they suggest that for a higher grade. It makes no sense to me, but we'll adapt. But for me, I want separate A, B, and C. But you have the review book. So do question 1 or question 2. Everyone got that? But here's what I'm going to do for you. You don't have to do A, B, and C. You do 2 of A, B, and C. 2 of the 3. Everyone got that? So you can do just A and B. So you have to do 2 short IDs. Everyone got that? Or do B and C or whatever it might be. Are we clear on that? That's all you got to do. 6 sentences. You're handwriting them. A, B, and C. Yeah, I'm gonna give you. Yeah, I'll give you some minutes. And it should be pretty, you can look at it. So it's kind of like a take-home test. But you have your notes, so you can look at them. Good answer. Sound good? All of them. 6 sentences. You should do more of it. No, I just want 6. Just kind of practice. Everyone got that? We're cool? We're good? Everyone happy? Everyone cool? Someone said that to me. Secretary, they kept saying, oh, they're cool. Must have been the word of the day. Oh, one more thing. So on Thursday, I am signing a practice testing class. It's going to be multiple choice questions. Do that class on this. Here on Thursday, you'll get the multiple choice questions. Next Thursday, we're going to do it online. We're going to do it. And so everyone has to do something in the next few days. You have to sign into APUSH. I never really used it in class, but you have to sign in because you have to be able to do that for the APUSH. Everyone's got to sign in. And if you switch classes, I guess this class doesn't have it, but people have to move bounced around. You might be in the classroom where it's at first semester. And there'll be things assigned for you on them. I put a bunch of just practice questions. Just if you want to do some practice questions, they're all on AP Classroom. You get immediate feedback. You can do it on your own. Just practice for the exam. It's just optional, right? There's a bunch of multiple choice, just a bunch of questions for you to look. All right, so let's get back to class. We're not doing that. So this is a good spot to say, okay, even though we're kind of in the 50s, you can see with the election of 1952, you can see the beginning of the 50s and what personifies the 50s more than anything else. McDonald's. That is not the first McDonald's, even though the first McDonald's were in that style. And I love the old drive-in McDonald's. But I should add this. Anybody know where the first McDonald's was? You're thinking about the chain, but not the first McDonald's. When they franchised it. San Bernardino, California, by Dick and Maurice McDonald. Yeah. Now, when they franchised it, Illinois would have one of the first. And McDonald's still does well. Just sometimes kind of blows me away. So, because it's clean, relevant. The election of 1952 happened during the Korean War. And MacArthur was too out there, especially once Dwight Eisenhower decided not only he would run, but he also decided, I'm a Republican. He was kind of apolitical, even though he was a great politician per se. He was a liberal Republican. He infuriated conservative Republicans, much like Dewey did 4 years earlier. That is why they chose Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was a young and upcoming junior senator. He made a name for himself. Do you remember HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee? And then he was a master of red baiting. And he was known as dirty tricks and would say or do anything. I gave him all the dirty work and I hated him for it. But to appease the more conservative, rabidly anti-communist wing of the Republican Party. There's similar in the Democratic too. Nobody in the Democratic Party wanted to run against Stevenson. Truman was very unpopular. He wasn't going to run again. So, Adlai Stevenson, the governor of Illinois, was kind of coerced to do it. And so Stevenson was a moderate Democrat known for eloquent speeches. For example, he abandoned civil rights. He abandoned national health care insurance. So a little more liberal economically than Eisenhower, but not much. But I thought this was really funny. Both of the campaigns handed out cigarettes to supporters. I just find that hilarious. But don't forget, this was at a time where, doctors would tell, and I do that in quotes because these are on commercials, would tell pregnant women to go smoke cigarettes because it will help with morning sickness. Yep, that's actually very true. That and the occasional shot of brandy. Don't do that. So, Eisenhower seemed kind of, he was really charming and personally magnetic, but didn't come over well on the new media television. Stevenson was an eloquent speaker, but didn't come over well on television either. But this is the first election where TV is going to become nationalized. 48, there were a few TVs, 52 televisions everywhere. But the Democrats had a disadvantage. Communism. The Republicans pushed the idea that Democrats were soft on communism, saying Korea was a massive democratic mistake. Now, this makes no sense if you really think about it. How could you be soft on communism if you send 500,000 soldiers to fight against communism? And you're fighting a full-scale land war in Asia against communism. But that shows you how politics really doesn't have to be reality. And one more biggie. Do you remember the code name for the first Soviet bomb? Do you remember the name of that? Yeah, Joe 1. Everybody was freaking out. McCarthy had been going on for 2 years. The assumption were communists everywhere. And the Republicans were able to convince, especially Nixon and the rest of the Republicans, Eisenhower kind of was out of the fray, that the Democrats have allowed for a bomber gap, meaning fleets of Soviet bombers. They have so many more. Gap between US and Soviet bombers will fly over the Arctic with the brand new atomic bombs and rain nuclear death, atomic death, got to say it right, 1952, atomic death all over the United States. And people believed it, that the Soviets had fleets of bombers, and because of the Democrats were either incompetent, corrupt, or maybe communists themselves, they allowed for this to happen. So, let's clean house, we get rid of the corruption. Let me ask one more thing. Was there a bomber gap? Yes, there was a massive bomber gap. The United States had over 400 B-29 bombers. That's the plane, the massive plane that dropped the B-20, the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. We had 400 B-29 and B-50 bombers, an improved version, from bases in Japan and Europe to hit most parts of the Soviet Union. We had a new medium jet bomber called the B-47, but the Soviets had nothing fighting. And they were just starting to make a plane called the B-52 that the US still uses today that could bomb the Soviet Union. And we have these monstrosities. The largest production plane ever built by wingspan and length of the plane. It was called the B-36. It's called the Peacemaker. It had 8 engines. It was so big, it had 2 crews, sleeping quarters for the other crew. It could carry 70,000 pounds of bombs and fly for 12,000 miles. It was so big that they could sling a plane under its fuselage to either protect the plane or fly over the Soviet Union. It didn't work all that well, but look how much bigger it is than the B-29, which is massive. This plane is so big. We had over 150 of those. Anybody want to guess how many bombers the Soviets had that could fly from the Soviet Union, bomb US targets, and fly back again? Not a one. There was a bomber gap. It just went the exact opposite way. The United States had such an advantage in nuclear weapons that it was unbelievable. The Soviets had no bomb and very few bombs. But people in the United States were so afraid they believed it. They believed it. It had to be true. People felt we were losing the Cold War. And one more thing. Eisenhower was the first American president to use advertising. Rosser Reeves was used by Eisenhower. He was one of the most famous ad men in American history to sell quick ads, to sell the image of Eisenhower as a paternalistic leader. Now, I'm talking about image going back to, remember the log cabin and hard cider campaign in 1840, Tippecanoe and Tyler too? Image was important. Now think how the screen can change everything. But that requires money. Once this happened, money's going to become even more important than ever before in politics. So Eisenhower kind of sounded uncomfortable. So they filmed quick little ads where he could be paternalistic, father-like, but at the same time commanding. And quick, so it didn't seem awkward, which he kind of did in long speeches. Now, one more thing about Ike. He was really nearsighted, wore glasses. But they said wearing glasses weren't manly enough, not commanding. So he didn't have his glasses on. He couldn't see anything. So they had a cue card, massive cue cards that were 14 feet high, with words that were, letters that were like 10 inches big, so he could read it. And they filmed him, and they had him first looking down, commanding presence, looking down. He is the leader on top. Then reading the cue card, and then they got people off of Times Square in New York City to come in and ask questions, and they had him looking up, like he is top, leading. And they stuck it together in these little pithy ads that were really effective. Now, they seem kind of quaint today, but they work. He says nothing or kind of just makes up stuff. It doesn't matter. It works. See, look. What's done? Hey. Cue card. Cue card. He says nothing. This is even once. Card. Okay, but they work. Remember, you don't have to appeal in American politics to all voters. Just to that little group in the middle that don't follow politics very carefully. Those are the people that decide election, called low information voters. Doesn't mean they're not smart, they just don't follow it for whatever reason. And these worked. And then, of course, you need a campaign jingle, right? Something that'll get in your head. So it's time for It's Wonderful. Democrats. I know you're saying this is an awesome song, you're all thinking it, but it gets in your skull, doesn't it? Everybody likes high president. See, it's boring a hole into your skull. You love it, right? I know what you're thinking, and I agree. One more time. Okay, did it work? Eisenhower, everyone knew Eisenhower was going to win, and it was a massive landslide. Because Stevenson abandoned civil rights, much of the Deep South came back to Solid South. But Eisenhower would win. And Republicans, for 2 years, actually controlled the Senate. It would go back to Democrats again for another 30 years. But everyone had 56. 1956, it would be a replay of 52. Exactly the same. Ike would defeat Stevenson. And the big thing was Korea. Eisenhower vowed to end the Korean War. It took 9 months, but finally an armistice, a ceasefire would be signed on this line right here. And I've told you the horrific casualties already. They never signed a peace agreement and never have technically they're still at war. These are the horrific casualties. That's an American soldier going through the hell of the fighting, while Americans are back home enjoying this new affluence. He's clearly suffering from battle fatigue, what we'd say PTSD right now, and just trying to get through it. It was this surreal thing that has happened now so many times in our history through today. People are fighting, making great sacrifices in a war. At the same time, people are just doing whatever at home. And the United States still has 28,000 troops in South Korea and 2 fighter wings. And so it's still a centerpiece of the Cold War. South Korea is going to be a nasty dictatorship to the late 1980s. Now it's a pretty vibrant democracy, and they have a powerful army. But North Korea, their whole nation is basically an army. It's all a military state. And the Cold War still kind of goes on there, even though the Soviet Union is gone. So Eisenhower called his domestic program, the New Deal, the Fair Deal, dynamic conservatism. Not really sure what it means, but it doesn't matter. It's just a name. So it's basically, they're going to preserve the New Deal. And there will be massive public works, most famously the Federal Aid Highway Act. You might see it called the National Defense Highway Act. National Defense. What did it create? The interstate highway system. That would be the main routes shown here would be built over the next 30 years. For example, the interstates in Montana would not be fully completed until the 1980s. And they still add little bits to it. But National Defense Highway Act, I sold it too as a way to move troops around or evacuate cities in case of nuclear war. And as we all know, you go to a big city today with the highways, there's no traffic jams ever. You get around really quick. And one more thing, they expanded Social Security. So conservative Republicans were very furious at Eisenhower. And by 1957, 58, you start hearing Eisenhower being called a communist by his own party. That should give you an idea how volatile politics are. Once again, we say, oh, today is so, today is unique. Of course it is. Every time is unique. But today, there's never been a time where people have been so angry at each other. Not that. It's happened time after time. And that's building near Great Falls. Or sorry, near Bozeman, and that's near Helena. Or that's near Bozeman too. This is near Helena. That's near Helena, building the interstate. So the United States economy, though, was absolutely booming. The consumer economy, which really got its start in the 1920s, began to take off to our modern economy today. The problem was because of economies of scale, companies were producing more than what people could buy. They were outstripping demand. How are we going to get people to buy all the products produced by the new growing United States economy? Especially when the rest of the world began to start building too. Well, somebody mentioned in first period, a very good answer, have a lot of children. And that's coming too, but children don't buy a lot of goods yet. So we got to buy stuff now, but it's a good answer. Advertising. The second golden age of advertising would be the 1950s, the first, the 1920s. And they convince people to buy stuff they don't necessarily need, convince people they need stuff. And a great example would be TVs. No one believed they needed one, and it became the thing you had to have. But another big thing they would do with advertising was the new model year. Convince people that their old, the best example is car at this time. Their old cars were old, obsolete, you're a loser. People are making fun of you if you have the 1955 Chrysler. But if you get the 1956 Chrysler, you are cool. And it was shockingly successful. You do just minor little changes for a new model, and people will buy them up and get rid of their old one, thinking they got to keep up with their neighbors and show that they've made it. And so they would do it like with model years, or like General Motors would sell their entire brand. When you first are a young person, you would have a Chrysler. Then move up to like a Pontiac or a Buick. And if you really made it, sure. I mean, a Cadillac. That's the show you made it. Not so much anymore, but you see it, I have a friend, great guy, but he got a good job. First thing you want to do is buy a Lexus. Okay. We're still the same idiot, I know, but he's a good friend. But yes, you bought an $85,000 car, yes, but it works. I should have. And that one always makes me laugh. This is called the Sabre. This is the F-86 Sabre, the best fighter plane of the Korean War. And so they try to make it look like jet planes. So you don't ever see cars with the tail fins. That's trying to look like fighter planes. The Cadillac, the 1959 Cadillac, their tail fin was about 2 feet high. I guess it impaled bikers. But another thing they would do, even more important, was planned obsolescence. Build products that were designed to break. Build products that are all that you can't really repair, or that they're going to be obsolete and you got to replace them with a new one. So think about televisions, same deal. They start convincing people to buy TVs. In the 1980s, TV repair was still a big business. TV broke down, take TV to be repaired. That has all been taken over by planned obsolescence. Nobody repairs televisions. Oh. If your televisions are designed to last 3 to 5 years. If you get a television in the last 5 years, you're lucky. And then what do people do when their television quits working? Toss it, buy a new one. That's planned obsolescence. What's that? Yeah, you're lucky. Yeah, you're an exception to the rule. Good job. But think about everything anything in technology. Phones, they're specifically designed to be obsolete. It's specifically designed. And by the way, the model year works really well today in phones. There are a lot of people like, oh, I gotta get the new iPhone or whatever it might be. Design things to break. And think about our society today, how many things are 1 or 2 time uses and throw it away. That is planned obsolescence. They sell it as convenience, but it's planned obsolescence, so you got to buy a new one. I mean, I can still remember when the first plastic water bottles came out in the late 1980s. And I just remember thinking how stupid that was. Why would anybody pay extra for water that is run through a cheap filter and then throw it away? I just was blown away that people would buy it. Guess what? People buy it all the time. I have too. And yes, it's run through a filter. And I think, wow, I'm getting fresh. Boy, just tap on it, run through a filter. 99% of it. That's planned obsolescence. Is it effective? It's the world we live in. So that's the result. I wish I had a picture when they took all 100 TV sets out of every classroom and threw them all away at one time. There was a mound of TVs that was about 20 feet high out there by the shop. But this also happened when no one had cell phones and no one took a picture of it. So, also the growth of middle class America. You might remember the Great Depression, partially labor unions, also taxes, but more people than ever before could afford the trappings of an upper class life. More people could afford the new American dream, which I'll get to in 1 second, including a TV. And these are all the job numbers of World War II and beyond. And this is the percentage job growth of all the presidents, showing especially early on that you're going to get a lot of job growth. Some of these presidents, and that means more people with more money to spend. Also, pay was a little bit higher than them. So it is reds, blue, Democratic, Republican. So average job growth with Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush is negative. Obama, Trump was negative. Biden, Trump is right now will be slightly. But that just shows job growth is so much of it's dependent upon middle class people having jobs. Last thing write down for today, a middle class life. Or I'm sorry, the new middle American dream. Before it was to be that small farmer, remember Jefferson, everyone's gonna be small farmers. That is unrealistic. Now it's represented by own your own home, a car. And all these wondrous new consumer electronics defined by a television. But last thing I promise. But your kids can afford that and maybe have them. That became the new American dream. It is still the American dream to own your own home. Are children going to do better than their parents? Not right now.
Start gambling.
Just gamble.
Throw it all on the several times and you'll get it.
Well,
Or tripling.
it is actually kind of scary how many people are gambling all the time now. Those poly markets, it's actually terrifying on, especially young men.
I am not gonna be an exception.
You're gonna gamble?
I'm gonna be a gambler.
I should be stuck in the.
I just wanted to look and make sure.
Thank you.
Let me check real quick. I was gonna tell you and I just forgot.
Yeah. That doesn't work. I might just have to put it on like a different.
Oh, no.